Good day, students! I'm back again for another instructional video, and for today we will have another lesson to talk about, and this lesson will serve as our first new lesson for the second quarter. So I really hope, class, that I can have your full attention until the end of this video. And to start with, so I have here an article that has been circulating online this past few weeks. So I want you to read the title of the article and then ask yourself if you have read this article somewhere. Okay, so we have face-to-face classes to resume January 2021, Duterte clarifies. So have you heard of this article? If yes, then where have you got the information? And what do you know about this article? Now, if you are done answering my question, so I have here two sources that talks about this article. So I want you to read the two sources and then compare which one is more reliable to you. So first we have from an online news. So we have here, resumption of face-to-face classes hinges on President Duterte's decision. So President Duterte will have the final say on whether or not face-to-face classes will be allowed to resume early next year, Malacanang said on Tuesday. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque said while the Department of Education, or the DepEd, prepares for such possibility, the government will still review the country's coronavirus situation before deciding if students will be permitted to physically return to their schools. The preparations for that continue, although the decision is really up to the president, Roque said during a televised press briefing on Tuesday, and he noted that the Department of Health mentioned that the government hopes all areas in the country will be placed under Modified General Community Quarantine, or MGCQ, by the first quarter of next year. So we'll see what the development will be. DepEd will continue its preparation, but let's see the actual condition on the prevalence of coronavirus in various parts of the Philippines, he said. The government has promoted alternative learning method at the start of the school year in lieu of the traditional in-person classes in all community quarantine levels due to the coronavirus outbreak. Back in July, the president announced he would allow in-person classes in low-risk areas by January 2021. And Duterte said such decision is based on the assumption that vaccines could be made available by September. So far, the global race for the development of the COVID vaccine continues, but authorities are hopeful this could be developed by early next year. And we also have here from another source, we have from Facebook. So it says face-to-face classes is now officially declared on January 2021. So if you will choose, class, between the two sources, which one is more reliable to use? Diba? Definitely you would choose the online news since it was written by a credible author and was published in a reputable organization. So Facebook Manggod, you can see a lot of fake news, mga scam, and that's why it's really not appropriate if you are looking for a credible information. So the question is, why do we need to consider the sources of the information? Diba, class, we encounter a lot of information every day. That's why it's really a must that we should know how to evaluate information, whether they are reliable and credible to use. And since we're talking about information here, so your information sources also really matters. Diba? When you're looking for a certain information, you have to bear in mind that all of the information that you can gather are all credible and are all valid to use. Okay, so you really have to critically assess and evaluate the credibility of your information sources before using them in your research paper. So dili pwede ha nga magpataka lang ka og kuha ang information kay abig nakita nimo sa Facebook or sa Twitter. As what I've said before, you should be an information literate by now. And to help you know more about how you can gather credible information sources, our topic in this video would be of great help to you. So we will be talking about media and information sources. And before we formally begin, of course, let me share to you our student learning objectives for this lesson. So first, we have demonstrate an understanding of the values and differences of the sources of media and information. Next, examine the reliability, accuracy, value, authority, and timeliness of the different sources of media and information. And the last one, compare potential sources of media and information. And to start with, so let us define first what is meant by media source. So, media source refers to any resource that serves as a means of communicating to the general public. So, in simple words, this refers to the sources of your information. And you already know that we can already gather various information from different sources nowadays. And these information sources are categorized according to the following. So, we have first, human source. Next, Indigenous knowledge or media. We also have the library, and the last one we have the internet. So let's discuss them one by one in order for you to understand these information sources. Now let us start first with the human source. So human source refers to any person who can be a source of information or data. Now this one is already very understandable, right? So when we say human source, your information comes from certain people. And when you are using this kind of source, there are things that you have to consider. For example, we have the person's knowledge. We also have his or her educational background. Next, we also have experience. And the last one, we have the skills. So for the person's knowledge class, you have to assess first if that person is really knowledgeable enough about the topic that you are going to ask. Next, for the educational background, check their educational background if he or she is really qualified enough to share that certain information with you. For example, is he or she a college graduate? Do they have a license? Are they a master or a doctoral graduate? The higher the educational background they have, the better. And for experience and for their skills, you have to assess whether they already have enough experience and skills that could be of great help to you. And make sure that their experience and skills are relevant to the information that you need. For example, if you want to know any credible news, you can ask a newscaster or a news reporter. Or if you want to know more about medicine and treatments, of course, we have the doctors. And if you want to ask about your lessons, of course, you also have your teachers with you. And if you want to know more about science experiments, we also have the scientists. Okay, so that's for human source. This refers to information that you can get from certain people. So now let us proceed to the second source of information, which is the indigenous knowledge or media. And in order for you to understand this one better, so let's try to define first what is meant by the word indigenous. So indigenous means, or this refers to any native, local, originating, or produced naturally in particular region or locality. So if we try to connect this one to indigenous knowledge, then indigenous knowledge refers to a knowledge that is unique to a specific culture or society, and most often it is not written down. So in simple words, indigenous knowledge refers to a certain information or knowledge found in a specific place or culture only. Examples of indigenous knowledge includes the rice fish culture in China. So this refers to a farming technique for over 1,200 years in South China and was recently designated as a globally important agricultural heritage system by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. As what I've read about rice fish culture in China, the carbon dioxide released by the fish now have a positive effect on the rice during the process of photosynthesis. That's why they created this kind of system. Another example for indigenous knowledge, we also have the rain harvesting in India. So rain harvesting is the process of collecting rainwater from surfaces in which rain falls, filtering it, and storing it for multiple uses. So that's for indigenous knowledge class. So this refers to knowledge that are found in a specific place or culture only. Next, we also have Indigenous Communication, and this refers to any transmission of information through local channels or by which the culture is preserved, handed down, and adapted. So again, Indigenous Communication refers to the local communication of a certain place that aims to preserve their culture. And one example also include the cave paintings or any written documents used by any tribe in different places. Okay? Next, if we have Indigenous Communication, we also have Indigenous Media. So Indigenous Media may be defined as forms of media expression that were conceptualized, produced, and circulated by Indigenous people around the globe as vehicles for communication. So again, class, Indigenous Media are the medium used by Indigenous people to relay or express certain information, and these media comes in 5 forms. We have first, we have folk or traditional media. Next, we have gathering and social organizations. We also have direct observation, records, it could be written, carved, or oral, and the last one we have oral instruction. So for folk or traditional media class, these are actually the forerunners of mass media, and like the mass media, they are used primarily for entertainment, but may also promote education, social values, and cultural practices, and each culture has its own form, so they can present it through a song, dance, puppetry, festivals, plays, storytelling, debates, proverbs, parades, and so on. And for gathering a social organization, this refers to the different groups or organization in that place. For example, an association that collects monthly donation of rice, or it could be a group that manage or facilitates the water distribution, or pwede po siya like mother clubs or any group that is beneficial to their community. Next, for direct observation, now communication class does not have to be intentional or even involve another person. Most learning during childhood is actually a result of imitation. So you acquire something by just simply directly observing the people in your community, especially from your family members. Next, we also have here the records. So again, it could be a written, carved, or oral. So records may take many forms. Some may use leaves as their paper, or they can just carve it on stone to preserve any records or documents. And the last one, we have the oral instruction. So obviously, this refers to any instructions given orally. For example, parents teach their children and elders guides youth. So actually, class, not all information can be found or can be learned in school, right? Since you can also learn other information through deliberate oral instruction from the people around you. And these are again the forms of Indigenous media. Now let us proceed to the third source of information, which is the library. So I know that you are all familiar what a library is. So this refers to a place in which literary, musical, artistic, or reference materials such as books, manuscripts, recordings, or films are kept for use but not for sale. Now, there are actually 4 major types of libraries. So we have first, the first one. This serves colleges and universities. We have the academic library. And the second one, this serves cities and towns of all types. So from the word cities and towns of all types, this is the public library. Next, we also have a library that serves students from kindergarten to grade 12. So we have the school library, and the last one, this library is located in specialized environments such as hospitals, corporations, museums, the military, private business, and the government. So this library is called the special library. And the last source of information class, we have the internet. Now, I know that the internet is already the trend nowadays. So this has become the best source of information because its vast database will most likely contain any and all information needed at a moment's notice, giving users ease of access and convenience in their searches. So if we are to compare both the library and the internet, they actually have their own advantages and disadvantages. So for the libraries, these provide free access to scholarly books, journals, newspapers, encyclopedias, and other print reference sources, and you can also make sure that all of the information that you can get from the library is really credible and is really reliable to use. However, the library is not available 24/7. Unlike with the internet, since the internet you can access it 24/7, and you can also find an answer very quickly on the internet to many questions, and you can find websites on the internet that offer text, video, audio, photos, graphics, and other multimedia. However, not all information on the internet is free. So there are some articles that really need subscriptions in order for you to gather that kind of information. Moreover, the internet is really very broad, so you would really have a hard time looking for information that is really reliable or that is really credible to use. So again, class, there are 4 sources of information. We have the human source, indigenous knowledge or media, the library, and we also have the internet. Now let's proceed to the next topic, which is all about the classifications of media and information sources. So there are actually 3 classifications of media, class. So we have the primary source, the secondary source, and the third one is the tertiary source. So let's discuss them one by one. Now let us discuss first the primary source. So this source refers to an immediate, first-hand accounts of a topic and from people who had a direct connection with it. So the keyword for primary source, class, is first-hand. So meaning to say those sources that have not been altered or modified yet. So this means that this displays original thinking from the author itself. And examples of primary sources include the following. We have literary creations like novels, short stories, and poems. We also have internet communications and email, artifacts, diaries, letters, audio recording, and we also have publications, newspaper article, original documents, and the last one, we have journal articles published and peer-reviewed. So again, primary sources, class, refers to sources that have not been altered or modified yet, and this means that this displays original thinking from the author itself. Now let's proceed to the secondary sources. So these sources describe, summarize, or discuss information or details originally presented in the primary sources. So meaning to say, they have already been altered or modified. Though they may talk about the same topic with the primary sources, but other people's interpretation and analysis have already been included in the text. Examples of secondary sources, we have the following. First, bibliographies. We also have textbooks, dictionaries and encyclopedias, biographical works, histories, magazine. We also have literary criticism such as journal articles, and the last one we have the website. So again, class, for secondary sources, these refers to sources that have been altered or modified. So though they may talk about the same topic with the primary source, but other people's interpretation and analysis have already been included in the text. That's why it's called a secondary source. And the last one, class, we have the tertiary sources. So these refers to sources that consist of information that is a distillation and collection of primary and secondary sources. So again, for tertiary sources, these refers to sources that organize, compile, and summarize other sources. So the keyword there, class, is a collection of primary and secondary sources. So examples include, we have first, almanacs. We also have bibliographies, directories, chronologies, guidebooks, and we also have fact books. So again, class, tertiary sources refers to sources that organize and combine the primary sources and the secondary sources. If you notice, there are some tertiary sources that can also be considered as a secondary sources. So again, the classifications of media and information sources are the following. We have the primary source, secondary source, and the last one we also have the tertiary source. Now let's proceed to our last topic for this lesson, which is all about evaluating your sources. If I will ask you, class, why do we need to evaluate sources? So evaluating sources is really substantial, class, especially if you are a student or if you are working in an academe. Diba? One of the things that you do here is to do your research. And when you do your research, of course, you want to find the best information to support your research topic. And that really requires careful evaluation of all the information that you find. Moreover, if you know how to evaluate information, class, then of course you can find the most relevant information to support your topic, and you can also ensure the credibility and the reliability of your research paper. And to help you improve your evaluating skills, so we're going to discuss in this video some criteria in evaluating sources. First, we have sources must be up to date. So this means, class, that your sources must be recent and updated enough. So for this one, this implies that those information that you will use should be current and should not be outdated. For example, in academic writing, you can only cite information that belongs to the 5 years range. For example, if we are already in 2020, so you can only cite those information that were published within 2015 and up to now. But if it was published in 2014, then it's no longer considered valid since wala naman siya nasulod sa 5 years range na allowance. Pero if we are already in 2021, then those information that were published in 2015 will also be considered as outdated na. So you will start looking for sources that were published from 2016 to 2021 na. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Next, we also have authority. So you have to consider, class, that all of your information must come from an author or organization that has an authority or expertise to speak about a certain topic. So for authority, all you have to do is to double check the author's credential, assess whether he or she is really an expert with the topic that he or she is writing. Then might as well check, class, if it was published in a reputable research domain like .edu, .gov, .org, or .net, since those research domains are some of the domains that really produces reliable and credible information. Now let's proceed to the next criteria in evaluating sources. So we also have the audience. So when looking for information, class, so you have to identify first who are the intended readers or target audience of the source and its purpose. So upon reading the information again, class, that you have chosen, so identify first the target audience. For example, is it for students? And what is its purpose? For example, is it informing students how to study efficiently? So you really have to check that one, the target audience, and the purpose of the information before using that source as your reference. Now let's proceed to the next one. We also have here the publisher. So upon reading any information, class, so you have to check if the source is connected or linked to a credible and legit sponsored websites or affiliated to groups or companies. So another way to evaluate your information, class, is to really check its publisher. So make sure that it is published in a reputable organization. For example, we have Bookware Publishing Corporation, St. Matthew's Publishing, and we also have Ateneo de Manila University Press, and many more. So if you are still hesitant with the publisher of the information, then better not use it. Okay, so just look for other sources na lang. Next, we also have bias. So for this one, extremely biased sources will often misrepresent information, mislead public opinion, and are ineffective sources. So In order to maintain the objectivity of the information that you are going to use, class, so just make sure that the author is not biased in presenting the information. So it shouldn't be just about the author's preference or opinion about the topic. So if you notice that the information contains a personal agenda of the author, then do not use that information since it will not be considered as valid or reliable. So what you have to bear in mind lang yun is that the author should present all sides of the topic and the information should be objective at all times and not subjective. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Next, we also have the design. So determine if the source appears to be professionally and properly written and if the tone it uses is appropriate to the topic. So with this one, try to skim or survey the text first whether it was written professionally and check if the words used are appropriate to their target audience or not. So if you notice, class, that some parts of the text are written informally and even uses slang or vulgar words, then try to look for other sources na lang. Okay? And the last one, let's have the accuracy. So for accuracy, so you have to determine, class, if the data and content is verifiable and if the source is comprehensive. So in other words, for accuracy, make sure that you are getting all of your information from a reliable or credible research databases like Google Scholar, ProQuest, Science Direct for online information. And of course, we also have the library for offline information. And then also make sure, class, that the author or institution that published the page provided their contact details in case you want to ask something about the research study or if in case you want to ask permission to use their study. So that's for accuracy. And that ends our instructional video for today. So I hope that you really learned something from this one. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you again on my next video. Goodbye, everyone.